Yeah, it's yeah, lockdown's really sort of binging on box sets.
Yeah.
Binging on.
And your favourite?
Well, I've had a few. I did like on Netflix. There's a wonderful film, The Dig, I watched last night. That's well worth watching. It's about the dig at Sutton Hoo when they found the ship burial.
Oh, really?
I saw something advertised about that. It's from a book, isn't it? Wasn't it taken from a? They've just been advertising it, saying it's one to read.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one to watch.
Mm.
Don't judge me, but I've been watching a bit of Dynasty.
Dynasty.
How retro.
The very old Dynasty.
No, I don't know where you find that one, but it's the new one I've been watching. It's not
But
quite.
that used to be our Friday nights. That you could go and tea at my nan's watching Dynasty. Showing me age now, aren't I?
Oh, good luck.
Dallas
Linda
was
Evans, Joan Collins, and big shoulders.
Yes.
We used to watch Dallas on a black and white TV, and you remember when they went wrong, and the pictures used to be pushed down, so you had very fat bodies and very, very wide hats. Should we kick off then, Dave?
Yeah, sorry, there's a couple still joining actually. So I'm just clicking to admit there. If that's all right. And then we can kick off. So hopefully my screen is shared.
Yeah.
Everybody see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So sometimes I don't open it up, so that's not always it's not always a good start. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. I don't know if anybody recognises Lord Riesdale. I've not seen him wear a suit for a long time, Rupert.
I know. Well, it's funny. Should you wear a suit on lockdown Zoom? I did for a while, but then, yeah.
Well, it's nice to see a little picture of you in a suit, Rupert, I must admit. I mean, Rupert and I have known each other for about 10 years. I was building an eco park in Wigan, and Rupert showed an awful lot of interest in it. And then whenever we had any sort of openings, any kind of like launches, any kind of like milestones in terms of the development, Rupert would hotfoot it on a train up to Wigan to where I think the taxi drivers used to, when you used to explain where you wanted to go, Rupert, didn't the taxi drivers in Wigan often say, is that place Windmill?
Yeah, you had one of those early small windmills, which didn't really produce the power you thought.
It's about 20,000 kilowatts a year, so it's not too bad. but that's how they used to describe my my eco park, the place with the windmill, or wind turbine, as we like to refer to it. So yeah, we've been working together for a long time. We've been working on streamlined energy carbon reporting, and then more lately on climate change professionals. But Rupert, I don't know if you want to give a little bit of a background to you, Rupert. I don't know if everybody knows what you're about.
Yeah. Well, I've been working on climate change since about 2000, where I founded the All Party Climate Change Group. Been working on legislation since then. Founded the Anaerobic Digestion Biogas Association, ran that for a few years, and then ran the Energy Managers Association up until Christmas last year, and have started looking much more at the professionalization of climate change professionals, because the problem we're facing is energy is very specialist. Sustainability is specialist on the other side, but to do climate change, you need a number of different skill sets coming forward. And I think this is going to be a very large profession in 3-4 years' time, building up. I think everybody sees that there is a skill shortage in the marketplace, which is difficult to move into, because there is no professional real body that deals with climate change as a subject, rather than just elements of it, which is energy, sustainability, environmental management, and a number of other areas. So what we're doing is we're looking at the training and bringing together the climate change community. And what I really want to do is bring about recognition of people's skill sets and talents So one of the areas that we will be doing is creating, well, it's just almost in final stages, creating a register of people who have the skill sets, who have taken training, so that they can actually show to their organizations or to the people they work for that they actually have these skill sets and do understand the fundamentals of the area they're working in.
So credibility and trust.
Yes, yes. Just to hit one of the things is a lot of people talk about accreditation of courses. For me, accreditation of courses is, I've seen so many courses where you go along to an accrediting body and they don't even know what you're talking about and they accredit it. What we want to do is we are looking at a much more holistic approach where people take the courses. There's going to be a lot of modules online so people can do continuous learning, which will all be CPD. And then we'll have an interview process at the end so that if you want to become a recognized climate change manager, that's the process to get there. But we won't be putting people on a register as a recognized climate change manager until we know that they actually can do the job. So what we're looking at is understanding the skill sets and knowledge base, and that final process is through an interview process with a senior energy, sustainability or environmental manager. So it's a half an hour on the 40 minutes on the telephone or slightly longer, where we work through the skill sets to make sure that you actually have the knowledge base so that we can put you down there so that if you then go and work with companies, you're not doing it from the basis of, well, I've just decided to set myself as a climate change manager. So sorry, that's a quick run through. I think where we're building the experiences from being setting up all the ESOS at EMA, we ran the ESOS lead assessor registers. So we've done all that and all the qualifications for that and the certification for that. And we've been running courses for a number of years. I think we'll go through the courses, but I just want to stress at this point, there is an awful lot inside, built into these courses, which takes a lot of time. And whilst we understand that the courses are short courses, one day, we see that as the start point. People are going to learn a hell of a lot more, obviously, doing the job. But we see that as sort of giving people the absolute basics that they will need, and that is quite a lot. We have one of our trainers on, Scott Armstrong. Scott, do you want to give a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I've been, my name's Scott Armstrong. I've been working in the energy and sustainability markets for 29 years now, spending my first 10 years working in the supplier community, working with industrial and commercial clients to drive down their consumption, and using data as a means to do that in terms of reporting. I then went and spent 10 years as executive director of 2 energy and carbon consultancy businesses. Again, taking all of the data piece that I've been working with clients in the supplier side to working with clients directly, and working with them on lots of carbon reduction strategies. I was working with people like Post Office, Barclays Bank, John Lewis Partnership, a number of other customers. We had about 120 different customers, and that was really useful, valuable experience. Then I went to work directly for Born Leisure, and I've spent the last 8.5 years until summer of last year, the end of summer of last year, working as head of energy and sustainability for Born Leisure, which has about 56 operating sites in the UK, spends about £45 million a year on utilities. And in the 8.5 years I was there, we managed to reduce the carbon emissions by 43% during that period. So, you know, real kind of hands-on experience. And when Rupert and Dave approached me about writing some of these courses, I thought, well, it's a great way of actually putting down practical experience and knowledge, you know, into a training course to help the professional development of people who are coming through the ranks in terms of you know, the climate change profession. I'm also I've worked with Rupert and the on the board of the Energy Managers Association for a few years. I'm a fellow of the Energy Managers Association, and I'm also currently chairman of that group. So lots of relevant experience, I think, that can be applied. And for me, it's about knowledge sharing. Massively important to share as much knowledge as we possibly can in this marketplace. And as Rupert says, it is growing and growing and growing. You know, all of the work that businesses are going to be doing post-COVID is going to be linking a green recovery with their remaining financial recovery post-COVID. So really important time for the industry, and I thought, what better way of supporting it than to share some of my knowledge and experience.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Scott. Absolutely brilliant. And it's good to have you on board. The thing I wanted just to touch on was, you know, at the moment there's an awful lot of terminology talk. You know, what is all these kind of things that we're hearing about a lot at the moment, and quite often, sorry, there's some more people joining. I just need to add, and quite often, not even the people who are sharing this information with us know what some of these things are. So that's where Rupert and Scott have touched on this massive sort of knowledge base that needs to kind of increase, really. So what the questions I want to ask this morning are, you know, do we want the recognition? Do we want to differentiate ourselves? Do we want to understand more? Do we want to improve our career prospects, our qualifications? Do we want to combat climate change and make a difference? And hopefully a lot of you guys are saying yes to these things. When we set up Climate Change Professionals, we were looking at three main areas. One being the pledge, which is the community and the nice to haves and the helping one another and sharing best practice. Recruitment and training, there with our sort of our reasons for establishing Climate Change Professionals. Just on the pledge, we have some interesting sessions coming up. Health and well-being session that's being done by two doctors who are working frontline in the NHS, and also how that kind of links and correlates with climate change and the climate change anxiety that some people suffer. Other things that are coming up, I was talking just day before yesterday in relation to a fantastic project out in Mexico, which is about restoring the coral reef. And we're just trying to bring some nice to have, some good things in our community, really, that we can share. We are sort of like-minded people all trying to make a difference in this sort of sector, so it seems fitting to do those types of things. And we also have the recruitment side. So often on our website there are new jobs that we've been instructed to find candidates for. They're also on our LinkedIn. And I think I email out some of these jobs as and when they pop up to our pledge community. And then the other area, the training, is the bit that we really want to talk and focus on today. Last year we did put out a survey to try and find out what type of training our pledgers, is that the right word for them, Rupert? The pledgers?
Not sure.
We'll discuss and get back on that one. And the things that came out of the questionnaires that we sent out in relation to the training came back in a sort of multitude of answers. One of them was in relation to bespoke training. So we're already talking to some organisations about creating a very bespoke climate change training for those organisations. There was quite a few of our candidates that were being placed in roles that wanted specific training, and also that's part of our ethos really, to support those candidates once they're in new posts. And then two of the other areas that came back were these two courses we want to really touch on today, which is the Climate Change Manager course and the Net Zero Manager course, and Scott's been instrumental in developing that Climate Change Manager course. The structure of the courses at the moment are 2 full days of online training, and we'll go through each of those days in a little while. There are also some online modules, of which you choose 6, and they take about 20 to 30 minutes. And like Rupert said, in order to have the recognition of Climate Change Manager, there's a final interview. And there it just, sorry, my dad's just calling. My dad phones every day the same time since the first lockdown in March. How sweet is that? So I've had to bin him on that. The other thing I wanted to mention is you can actually do these courses individually. We're not saying everybody has to have the Climate Change Manager and go through the full course. You can actually split them up, and you can also take them over different times as well. So if you're time precious at the moment and fed up of online Zooming and webinars, then you could do one course soon, and then you could do another course later in the year maybe. So over to Rupert for the Climate Change Manager, day 1.
Yeah, so if we just, and Scott will jump in on this as well if I've missed things out. I think we've got a number of courses, and obviously when you put courses together, everybody says, well, which is the one I should do? What we've looked at is courses in different areas. So the Climate Change Manager is the basic course. It's not basic at all, actually, when we went through it. It's incredibly detailed, and the people who have done it already sort of come out feeling that they've had their, quite a lot of detail in there. This one is really looking at all the elements you have to pull together. So science behind climate change, I think most of the people in this web will know how to do this, but what we're also looking at is, when we're introducing this, is how you could introduce it to your target audience. And it is amazing even now how few people understand elements of this. Greenhouse gases. Now, people talk about carbon dioxide and 1 balloon's worth of carbon, hot air balloon's worth of carbon dioxide. That's very simplistic. What we're then looking at is, okay, what are greenhouse gases? Carbon dioxide obviously being the main one, but of course then you've got things like methane, methane emissions from landfill, CFCs, HFCs, all these different emissions that you're actually talking about. And one I only heard about recently, which is used as bionethesis, which stays in the atmosphere for 6,000 years, and is a really rather nasty one. So it's looking at greenhouse gases. Scott, then moving on to calculating a company's carbon footprint, because that's what you did for Bourne.
Yeah, so I did it for Bourne when I was there each year, and subsequently I've been working on behalf of a number of smaller clients in my new role, and I take everyone through from start how to calculate a company carbon footprint, the data that's required, the conversion factors that you've got to use, etc., etc. And we work through a live example of a carbon footprint for a client I did just before Christmas, actually. And so this is real kind of life, and readily available.
And of course, what we're then looking at there is scope 1 and 2 and 3.
Absolutely.
1 and 2, I think people are starting to understand, although one of the areas people really struggle with is grey fleet and transport. And I think that's going to be a key. Charles, you deal with scope 3, do you? Yeah. I mean, transport is hard, but scope 3 is damn near impossible in a lot of things. I think that's going to be a really interesting area where companies and people like councils are really going to start asking for that information as part of their procurement process. I think that's going to drive a lot of, I think that's going to drive a lot of thought process. So you might end up with working with companies or consulting with companies going, we actually need to come up with our scope 3 emissions, or our scope 1 and 2 to add to somebody's scope 3 to actually fulfill the procurement processes. And I wouldn't underestimate just how important that's going to be in the future. We're already talking to large companies who won't deal with companies unless they have proper sustainability plans in place. I noticed one of the things Scott was doing was a due diligence piece for a very large finance company, but they do take it much more seriously than I think is understood at the moment. Okay, so then we move on to achieving carbon reductions. This is the bread and butter, but of course you've also got to do it. It's not as simple as saying we've got a great way of reducing carbon. You've also got to make it attractive financially, and you've also got to be able to take it to the companies in such a way they understand what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it, which is a big sticking point. And that moves on to engaging with the board and other decision makers. Boards are very loath to spend money. And of course, they're starting to get it, but it's understanding what the drivers for a board are. It might be that the CEO is very committed towards climate change. That's a great one, but you also know that the CFO is going to be very adverse to spending any money whatsoever, especially in the current climate. And then what we're looking at here is setting carbon reduction targets as part of a climate change action plan. We'll be looking at net zero in another course. It's touched upon here, but this is an area where people are just making things up as they go along. I had one council, I was talking to two councils, and one council was, we're going to be net zero by 2040, which is frankly impossible. And then the next door council said, we're going to be 2038 because it's 2 years earlier than the next door council. And I spoke to both council officers and they go, no, we have no idea how we're going to do it. It's the councillors who said we're going to do it. So setting carbon reduction targets that are achievable and explaining to companies why they're achievable is really important. So that's the first day.
Rupert, I think there's another point. This is there really quickly. Is what do people understand about net zero, carbon neutral, carbon positive, carbon negative, all of these terms that are around there, which will go into a carbon action plan. They really need to understand the basis, the fundamentals before they get to that, get to that understanding of what each of those actually mean to their business, and then linking it in with science-based targets to give it credibility. That's all of the piece that we're trying to get here. So it's about quality rather than, as you say, just making a decision about, well, let's do it slightly quicker than the next person, because that's just greenwashing.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, when you look at this first day, there is an awful lot in here, and it's all based on real-time examples. We will be adding to all these modules on different areas. So there'll be CDP modules of 30-40 minutes. We're keeping them down to that because obviously a module of longer than that is so difficult to deal with. So we'll make more of them rather than less. And one of the ones I'm working on at the moment, but seems to be a Herculean task, is looking at the jargon we use and a glossary of the jargon that's going on, because it's one of those ones you have 2 sheets of paper and then you add another 2 sheets of paper. But anyway, so that's looking through, and I'm finding stuff that I've never heard of before. So Dave, do we move on? So the second day on this one, well, these are individual courses, so you can take them as individual courses or you can take them together. But obviously they won't be 2 days in a row, because I think that's very difficult for people to manage. This second course is the Climate Change Action Plan. We were going to call it the Climate Reduction Action Plan. Obviously, the acronym for that doesn't quite work. Well, crap would be a great name for a course, but I'm not sure you get everybody taking it. And this is the bread and butter of this is where companies are going to get to at the moment. There was an interesting article in the Financial Times, the FTSE 100, that said, I can't remember what were the figures. It was saying like 50% of companies have declared a climate change emergency, and only about 8% have an actual plan in place. Yeah. This is where I think the growth area is going to be, is companies are going to be asking for climate change action plans. So what we've looked at here is, Scott, do you want to run through this one?
Yeah, sure. So the whole purpose of this course is to give people an understanding, but also a practical understanding of what should go into a climate action plan for your business, which is credible and stands up against science-based targets, etc., etc. And it runs through from start to finish. It talks about the beginning talks about a kind of recap on the first day, looking at greenhouse gases, the emissions within an organisation. We look at how to calculate the footprint. So if people that hadn't gone on the first day's course, we will cover this in the second day's course. If you did, then it's a great recap in terms of what is required. But that becomes the start point, and you've got to achieve that as the start point. You've got to understand your carbon footprint in order to understand where you need to get to, and the timeline associated with getting to that. We look at the supply chain, so scope 3, as part of a climate action plan. So should your climate action plan just be the bits that you can directly control, which is scope 1 and scope 2, or should it also include everything that you buy and your supply chain value chain associated with that? The reality is to get to a net zero position, you're going to have to include scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 3 currently isn't within legislation. You've got to do things, but it is coming. So it's all about preparing yourself to actually get there. We look at how to structure a climate action plan. So right from the beginning to the end. With a governance, an external governance piece attached to that to give it even greater credibility. So it's not just about an internal document; it's about publishing this, being held accountable as a business for your actions, and saying we're going to use an independent source to actually provide governance against this and keep us on track. So they will tell us where we're failing. They will tell us where we're doing well. And we will publish that and be really, really open with the marketplace. It looks at how to engage with your board directors. It looks at how to bring projects to the board for approval. So it looks at the funding piece. It looks at the benefits that you're likely to get. So the a lifetime analysis of the benefits of particular projects. It builds in deliverables to those projects. So it says, this might be our timeline, but at each of these points, we're going to have a number of deliverables which we are going to build into the governance, so that you can see just how we're doing. We're putting our money where our mouth is, basically. And it's about how you implement it internally. So once you've got this climate action plan, it's been kind of structured and written. It looks at how you then implement that throughout the business. And that's not just board and getting somebody at the board to be the figurehead. That is about how you engage everybody across the business. So link it in with your mission statement and your values and behaviours in order to, for it to be really, really meaningful and have legs. The piece about evaluating all along, what you've achieved so far and what you're still yet to achieve. It depends on whether you set your target as becoming net zero, which is all about the equilibrium in terms of what's taken, what you're putting into the atmosphere versus what you're taking out of the atmosphere, or carbon positive, which actually means you're going over and above to take more carbon out of the atmosphere than you're actually putting in. Again, these come from targets. You need a plan associated with that, and a climate action plan is a long-term plan. So it's something that everybody in the business needs to be a part of. So at the end of that, you should have a really good understanding of what a climate action plan is, how to develop one from within your business, how to engage your board, how to engage your team, and how to put in place external governance and some deliverables against your timeline to be marked against.
Yeah, Scott. I mean, this is one of the areas that I think is going to be a massive growth area, because firstly, people declare the climate change emergency. Climate change managers are going to have to understand all the implications of that, which is what you'll be looking at in the first course. But companies are going to be asking for a climate change action plan. As it becomes more mainstream, this is going to be something that companies are going to say, well, we need somebody internally or externally to write this. And this is where we're coming up with a templated example coming forward.
And I have to say, based on the work that I was doing recently on the finance side for a company, investors are going to ask to see this as well, because the ESG side of this is really, really important. So you're not going to get investment unless you've got one of these in place.
And just coming back to some of the points raised in the chat, science-based targets. I always love this because it's there's so much debate about which science-based targets you should use, but we'll definitely be covering science-based targets, won't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's a subject in its own right almost. Okay, moving on to the next course. Net Zero Manager, Dave's going to run through because he does part of the course. But net zero is the buzzword. So we could actually list all the courses as net zero courses because people are linking net zero. But I think net zero is very much more specific. It's linked to the government's Road to Net Zero, which was published by the Climate Change Committee. And that goes into a great deal more depth in areas such as embedded carbon that, to a degree, are being left out. Dave, do you want to run through this course?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rupert, and thank you, Scott, for talking about the Climate Change Manager course so well. On the day one of the Net Zero Manager course, like Rupert says, there's a hell of a lot of legislation and information out there about net zero, and I think the idea of our course is we're trying to help organizations to understand what it means for them, and also, sorry, we've got some more people joining, what it means for their organization, and then help them set a route map to achieve a net zero status. Also, as Rupert said a little bit earlier, local authorities declaring a net zero target, organizations declaring a net zero target, but not necessarily knowing exactly how to implement it or create a route map, or consider all of the angles that need to be involved in there. So what the course intends to do is to break through kind of the information that's out there and try to stimulate some debate on what's relevant for organizations and what isn't relevant for organizations, using very practical examples. For instance, the lecturer on this course is Dr. Stephen Finnegan, who has been lecturing in sustainable development for many years at Liverpool University, but has also been involved with KPMG and other organisations, making those organisations more sustainable. And the kind of areas that are covered, I've dotted them down there, the one to six, but it also helps to create a route map for the organisation. So if you are an organisation wanting to go net zero, then this will give you the tools, equip you with the tools to be able to go back to your organisation and implement that net zero sort of path, really. So day one is very much about understanding the legislation, understanding the white papers that are there, discussing them, critiquing them, looking at very, very practical options with examples. For instance, one of the big projects, and I think this is the way that we've looked at finding our trainers for all of our courses. We're looking for people who have that relevant experience, years of kind of practical experience, like Scott. Equally, Stephen is working on very live projects at the moment, very large projects that involve kind of like the full footprinting of organizations and looking at kind of that journey to net zero for them. So like I say, it's very, very practical course, and hopefully at the end of the course, the day one, those candidates on the course will be able to take that information back to their organization to help put in a strategy for net zero. On day two of the course, we're looking more into technology and finance. So we're now looking at, right, we've got the plan of how what we want to do in order to get to net zero. What technology is out there and what are the finance mechanisms? So like the Climate Change Manager course, we're looking at kind of areas of how you will take this to the board and all the stakeholders in a business. The practical example from day one involves an organization with lots of franchises. So it's kind of the information that's going to be needed in order to help those understand the journey. So all those technologies are there, all the returns and all the ways in which you can calculate those for presenting them back to the board are involved. The various different finance options that are out there for chosen technologies, and that strategy of how you communicate it to the board. And again, it's a very, very practical course. The idea really is that, you know, our candidates will engage with us and share some of their knowledge, which will also be fantastic for the other candidates that are on the course. So everybody's gaining knowledge from one another, really. So that's pretty much the Net Zero Manager course. Both courses are designed, so the Climate Change Manager course and the Net Zero Manager course are designed to have share some modules, and Rupert will probably explain a little bit better on the modules that we have available. So once you've undertaken your 2 days, your fundamentals and then your climate change action plan, or your fundamentals and technology and finance course, you then have these online modules to go through. So Rupert, did you want to just spell out what you've got on your modules?
Yeah, so just recapping a little bit, just looking at the chat coming through, I think everybody realizes that the climate change is not just it's been seen as cutting across multidiscipline areas. Mm-hmm. So to move forward, you really have to understand quite a few different elements. And whilst elements of the courses are the same, the focus is slightly different. So fundamentals I think is what you're going to actually come face to face with all clients, the basics that they're going to need, or the company you're working with. Climate Change Action Plan gives you the tool set to deal with that. Net zero is dealing with the regulations and the legislation around net zero. And, you know, we already have pieces of legislation like ESOS and SECRA, which have come in and are asking for this. But I have a feeling that to meet the COP requirements and to take it forward, we're going to see much more legislation coming down the line. I see it very much like HSE, which wasn't given a great deal of prominence until you brought in corporate manslaughter, at which point it was incredibly important for boards not to go to prison. And I can see this happening with climate change action plans and routes to net zero. So looking at the modules, I've just given an example. Sorry.
Just before you finish on that, Rupert, there's also in the kind of white paper and the information that's out there at the moment, there's a very good steer for organisations in areas to look at, not in their own businesses, but in kind of like emerging technologies and things. So I think there's an awful lot of information out there, and it's just bringing it all together and helping people sort of mindsets sort of work on kind of how they can practically change things in their organisation.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't read the Net Zero, the Climate Change Committee's report, it is an interesting document. Some of the technologies we're relying on don't even exist yet. But there are some good news. It's like, to me,
We just lost you, Rupert.
And then were suggested. So there are some really good news stories. So the online modules will be looking at a lot more, but to have taken some of the basic ones. So HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, often people say that should be broken up, and we probably will do, but that's just running through the energy flows in a building. Pumps and motors, a lot of people overlook those, but they're the major energy uses, especially in air handling units. If you're working on big air handling units, they use so much more power than people expect. People focus on lighting, but you've got to shift the entire air in a building twice an hour, which does take a lot of energy. Moving on. Dave's technological feats haven't. Right, transport. We're going to break this down into a lot of different areas, but this is the main one, of course. It's looking at how you look at the assessing the information from fuel cars or grey fleets, how you then convert that into either kilowatt hours or whatever you want to do using DEFRA conversion tables. And there's a lot of information we haven't done on DEFRA conversion tables and how you use those. And then looking at the main strategies, logistics, telematics, energy efficiency, and a really big one, driver training, which can save you 10% of your fuel costs. And basically, I've done 3 different types of courses on that. And it basically says, do not treat your car like your truck like a racing car. You don't have to get away from the lights that quickly. Just by reducing the speed moving away from the lights saves you an enormous amount. And this will be a separate subject, but of course electrification of fleet is a major issue. And of course that will then have massive implications of how you set up charge points, loading, do you have the transformer requirements, could you actually deal with a fast charger? I did some work on this recently, and a fast charger on the motorways is the equivalent, and one of those fast chargers is the equivalent loading of 250 houses. So understanding what is possible and what isn't. Behavior change and engagement, this is a whole course in itself, which we will be doing other courses on. Really interesting. It's sort of, behavior change used to be turn the light off, and you had that, that sticker that everybody ignored studiously for years until it got so old it fell off the wall. It's much more about, okay, how do you get engagement from the top down? And I think it's a lot easier now. When I started 20 years ago, I was arguing that climate change existed. Now, you've got a lot of buy-in, but it's how to make that work in such a way that it's actually sustainable rather than greenwash. Supply chain, we'll be running through some of the major elements to look at in the supply chain. One of the ones that I've just been doing some work on and is hardly looked at all is IT. So not your IT equipment, because mostly that IT equipment is going on the cloud, but your actual your emissions from the cloud, from all the big server centers. And airlines are looking at 3 to 4% of global emissions at the moment. Within 2 years, computing will be 25% of emissions, and yet nobody's really measuring it. You know, there is a massive carbon footprint, and there's a carbon footprint in the webinar we're holding at the moment, which people forget.
Just as an aside, I read an interesting stat the other day that if you switch your camera off on a Zoom call, it saves 96% of carbon.
Right. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Is everyone switching off now?
No, Scott, I mean, anyway, the carbon you're using on this is a fraction of the carbon we're using. And I think this is going to be interesting because, you know, who is not sitting there working in a different way than they worked over the last few years? You know,
I saw a very interesting thing last night on Facebook, actually, with a friend of mine who works for the NHS as an accountant, and he was sort of saying how his life has changed massively. You know, he'd spend 4 hours twice a week going down to London for meetings, for a 2-hour meeting, and he's like, we just do it all on Zoom now, and I can't see a reason for me to travel from Manchester to London for that type of for 2 hours of meeting when I can get other things done in the office. So I think the whole kind of like pandemic has changed how we think about things, how we use space, and it's all relevant, really, isn't it, when we're discussing emissions and climate change. Have you gone, Rupert?
it does, but I have a feeling they can get out of the office just for a while. Anyway, so then we move on to supply chain, and we've discussed this. This is going to be the big interaction between companies, and I reckon a lot of the consulting work coming out of this is going to be helping companies explain their carbon footprint to their supply chain. It's going to be a major selling point. It might be a selling point, it might be a requirement. I can see a lot of councils making it a requirement as part of their procurement process. So moving on to the next ones. Waste is, I mean, when you look at the methane output of waste and the fact that we put 74 million tons of waste into landfill last year, and that was down on the 98 million the year before. It's quite incredible, and the methane content of that is very, very high indeed. It's one of the largest climate change. So it's looking at the waste policies for the companies, food waste, recycling, but also energy from waste. Of course, it sounds great, energy from waste, but you do have the slight problem that, of course, you're burning stuff and sticking it in the atmosphere. We have a section on water. This, I think, everybody takes for granted, but Thames area is going to run out of water in 3 years' time. We're not going to have the water to meet demand. That's due to changes in rainfall pattern and increased use of water. So that's going to become a really big impact looking forward. And IT, obviously we've just discussed that, but looking forward on those. We'll be adding modules on a regular basis, but we'll expect people to take some of the major ones. Board support, that's a whole module in itself, and that'll be looking at real-time examples of how people have worked with boards and who in the board you should be targeting, and how you get to the board. Because you might, the idea that you're going to get in front of most boards is not true. You might have to get it in front of the board through a champion such as your CFO. I mean, Scott, you got in front of the board on your companies, but I suppose you had to deal with your line manager board member.
Yeah, so I reported directly into the board. So this is it's all about keeping it alive, making sure that all your board are up to speed with any changes and any requirements on a regular basis. So you know, board strategy is massively important, and I think in these modules we're going to be looking at, you know, actually focusing on specific stakeholders within the board. So it's your CEO, it's your CFO, who are your two main people that you need to engage with. CEO thinks from the heart, and the CFO, you know, thinks from the head. But together, they are the people that you need to win and bring on side. So we'll talk about strategies to achieving that, language to use, etc., etc.
And jargon busting, that's going to be one of those modules that just gets bigger and bigger. Okay, so people then, I mean, one of the questions everybody asks is, okay, if I've taken the courses, what do I get out of it? Okay, so we're just finalizing the register at the moment. Each person who passes the courses will go up on the register if they so wish. They don't have to. And then this will be like an online CV. So the online CV is useful for that. And people can then stick down their experience. To become a climate change manager, a recognized climate change manager, the final process is to go through an interview. Now, from the questions a lot of people have been asking, I think that, you know, there's people on the call who probably get through that quite quickly without having difficulty. But it's our reputation on the line. You know, we could destroy our reputations by having people on who really aren't up to speed. So we're not going to, nobody will get through the interview unless they hit the standards set by the interview process. If people haven't quite got there, what we'll then do is say remedial training in certain areas to make sure you've just got that up to speed. And then final thing is that you will then be on the register, and that'll be a public document. That means that if you go to an employer, your own employer, or you go to a client or whoever it is, you will then have listed the courses you've taken, the CPD hours you've undertaken, the fact you've done the final interview process, and I think that'll be a compelling argument, and it's a way for people to actually understand that you've actually got the skill set. What worries me at the moment is there's going to be a vast number of people out there who say, oh, I can do this, but haven't really got the body of knowledge to bring forward something it's going to be valuable to the company or clients they work for.
Absolutely, and that's our plan, really, to try and help with that knowledge. So I wanted to just highlight some dates and how you can get onto the courses. So the next Net Zero Manager Fundamentals is on Tuesday, the 2nd of March, with the Technology and Finance following on from that the following Tuesday, and that course, including the modules and the final interview, is 995 plus VAT. That's the place to go if you want to learn all about embodied carbon, operational carbon, and how it works in your organisation. And then the next course for the Climate Change Manager Fundamentals is Wednesday, the 3rd of March, with the action plan the following week on Wednesday, the 10th of March. And again, that one is 995 plus VAT, which includes the online modules and the final interview. There are a couple of ways to go and book it. You can book online. There's a link there. You can email us, info@climatechangeprofessionals.co.uk, or we have a couple of people online as well today, Mo, Isaac and Dawn, who can assist if you have any questions, fire them through. There's a little timetable here of the next date. So if the 2nd of March isn't convenient to you, then we've got the fundamentals running on the 13th of April and the 27th of April. They're the next 3 course dates. The Technology and Finance is the 9th of March, the 20th of April and the 4th of May. And then if you're favouring the route of the Climate Change Manager, the fundamentals is the 3rd of March, 17th of March and the 28th of April. And then you'll see there that the Climate Change Action Plan is the week after. As Scott mentioned before, you don't have to do them in that order because there will be a recap on the course. Here's a little bit of feedback that we've had so far from the courses. It's all very, very positive, and people are happy with the style and how we engage. And I think one of the key things that's come out of it so far is, you know, the people we've got presenting these courses are really knowledgeable in their field, and so in sharing that information and the style in which that information is shared is very, very valuable to those that have attended the courses so far. They're also saying they want to recommend it, which is great.
Yeah, so you can just on that though, you can of course take it at the end of it. We think it's best to take the 2-day courses, but Dave, they can take individual courses if they so wish.
Absolutely. I mean, from a time point of view as well, it's difficult at the moment for parents who've got kids at home, all the rest of it. So booking in a day now and then you know, doing the second day and the modules at another time, that's more convenient when the kids have gone back. Maybe might be the way to do it. Not everybody has to do the fast track and get everything done in speedy time. But as we sort of mentioned and alluded at the start, really, you know, this is a really exciting time for this industry, and a real fundamental change has seemed to have happened in terms of people wanting to learn about climate change, wanting to learn about net zero and put strategies in place in organizations, you know. And you know, we've had a lot of people who've sort of signed up to the course who are doing this just to kind of like improve their employment ability. So they, you know, they feel if they're on the register, they feel if they've got that stamp from us to say that they've done this course, it will massively improve their employment possibilities. And obviously the money that goes with it, you know, the salaries and things. So yeah, I don't know if there's any sort of questions. One of the things we wanted to just say was, by choosing us, you know, we're hopefully going to give you that recognition and help you differentiate yourself in this marketplace, develop and improve your understanding and your career prospects. And
yeah, so I mean, we're all about building community as well. So one of the things we really want to do is make sure that anybody who goes on our courses, we work with them over the next few years, so they build up and you know, they're part of the community, because I think this is going to be quite a large community of people. But there's if the way things go, there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot of opportunities going forward in a large number of companies, and we want to build the capacity of people to do that work.
Absolutely. And if you're, you know, you go on the net zero course and you get the information in how to work out your embodied carbon and all that for your organization and have problems going forward, then all you need to do is get back in touch with us and we can assist you with anything that you've kind of forgotten from the day or want some clarification on. I think that's the point Rupert's trying to make about the community. You know, we're here if anybody's got any sort of help going forward, really.
Brilliant. Well, if anybody wants to go on the chat, or otherwise, please contact us directly. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to everybody today.
Absolutely. Is there any final questions before we say goodbye? There's a few coming through on the chat actually. I'm presuming people. Scott's been brilliant. He's been responding to most of those, haven't you?
So yeah, I think we've covered most of those.
Scott has not been watching television during this presentation. Thanks, Scott.
Brilliant.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
This is fantastic. It's been really interesting. Is there an avenue for existing professionals to join the register without having to go through the course? And I appreciate what you said, Rupert, that there'll be a lot of people out there thinking, I can do this, I don't need the training. And yes, there will be a lot of people who think that. There will also be people who can do this without needing to go to do the training, yet are eligible to join the register. Is there an avenue for that?
Yeah, there will be. At the moment, we're just working through. What we're looking at the moment is, I don't know if some people on the call I've dealt with through ESOS and the ESOS register the EMA has. So I've done hundreds of calls on looking at how we do that. So we're working on that at the moment. And one of the things we'll probably require is a more extensive interview process that people can come on. And what we do there is, it wouldn't be a final interview process, it'd be a gap analysis. so that we can actually then look at everybody and say, okay, you've got this amount of skill set. We would suggest maybe taking 1 or 2 of the courses just to bolster your knowledge base, if that's needed, and then put people on the register.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
No worries. There's a hand up from Prince. I don't know if you've got a comment there, Prince.
Oh, good morning. Yes. I thank you very much, at least, for setting up this kind of opportunity for professionals to prove themselves in terms of ensuring best practice in climate change, in carrying out their climate change pledge. My question follows just like the last question, that people like myself who are new graduates, I started this profession by going into graduate study in oil and gas management, and immediately after my first degree went into the master's degree to do the same project. Even though I have done this up to master's degree, I still find the courses, the modules you have introduced here are very specific and quite useful for climate change enthusiasts who really want to go into climate change profession. But my problem here is I don't know what kind of support you have for people like us who are new entrants into this, to really get us on board and get certified. Okay. I am interested in following the course because, as I earlier said, it's very specific, and it is going to put one on the platform to best practice. But at this point in time, the courses are fee paying. In the first place, we are still grappling with our student loans and seeking employment in the areas of climate change and sustainability. So it appears a bit difficult to take up further fee paying courses. In addition to the burdens we already have on our shoulders.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is work with the community. So the courses are there, all the courses are there so that people can build up the requisite skill set to become a climate change manager. As soon as people actually start on the journey, we can put the courses they've got on the register. So it's more a question of, you don't have to do all the courses and come out at the end, before you get on the register. You can do the courses, you can go on the register. We're looking this as a longer term process where people can actually pick up the skill sets they have. We quite understand that there'll be people on the call who have a lot of skill sets and contacting us to discuss how we can actually recognize that as part of the process would be a good idea. And then we can look at the different areas. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, the intention is that the online modules will be provided individually as well. So it might be, Prince, that maybe just a small online top up or something might be useful, but also kind of give you that kind of like extra interest, to sort of develop it further as time goes on. And we're also, because as Rupert says, on the community, we're going to try and offer some free stuff as well. There'll be some free content, so just keep in touch with us and keep following what's going on. Like I say, we're doing a free mental health and well-being session that's linked to climate change very soon, and we've got one in relation to in relation to the coral reef and stuff. So there's all sorts of stuff going on. Just keep in touch with us and follow us.
Yeah, I suppose the important thing for us is there's going to be a lot of people out. We want to have skilled professionals out there. And we're not doing it on the basis that you have to go through all our courses, get there, because we do have the ability to actually look at people and say, okay, you've got these skill sets, so you don't have to do these courses individually.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say that even after 20 years and having written bits of the courses, I was on one of the initial run-throughs of one of Scott's courses, and I learned quite a lot there. You do pick up a lot, and of course you'll be picking up a lot in the job you're actually doing as well. So a lot of the learning process happens on the jobs you'll be undertaking.
And
brilliant. So
I think it's fab that we have people from all different backgrounds and different sort of abilities, because them everybody coming together and sharing their knowledge. There'll be things that Prince, if you came to on one of the course that other people would find useful, and vice versa. We all learn from each other in this sort of environment. I can't believe Rupert remembered that anaesthetist fact from the other day.
Well, it was a bit shocking.
I'm really impressed, Rupert. You've really
a drug that 6,000 years, and every time it's pumped out, it lasts for 6,000 years in the environment.
Well, you know what? When they got that fact, those boys were kind of really concerned about the use of that, weren't they? It's amazing how that information is power to people sometimes.
Excellent. So we'll just leave it there, because I think we've probably overshot our time. And thank everybody for joining us. And please do get in touch with us, and we'll follow up with you. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Cheers.
Dave?